Welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to get rid of stubborn fat by burning it, okay? Burning the fat that you have right now. And we're going to do this in a pretty cool strategic way. I wrote all this crazy stuff down. It gets all sciencey, but I'm going to break it down. So give me a couple minutes to break it down for you and show you how to burn fat, okay? How to burn it. So I even wrote some notes, okay, make it super simple. Wrote some kind of breakdowns of what I think you probably might want to know. If you do have any other questions, or you're like, Daniel, I just want to jump to the end. I want to know exactly what meal plan should I follow, what workout regimen should I follow, what supplements should I take to get rid of this stubborn fat that I'm dealing with, or to get rid of fat in general, okay? But I'm doing this because I want to give you value. I want to show you everything you need to know, so there's no questions about what's happening, why it's happening, what's going on in your body, okay? So number one is the breakdown, right? We have to break down the fat, of course. You can't burn fat if you never break it down. So there's a couple ways to do this. One, you can get liposuction, break down the fat, take it out of the fat cell. Or two, we can break it down through exercise and so on and so forth, other things as well, diet. And basically what I'm going to cover with you is this particular thing right here, okay? To break it down, the rate limiting step. And I know it sounds crazy, but basically what it is you can't start burning fat if you don't have this step in there, okay? And basically what it is, it's hormone sensitive lipase, okay? And lipase is basically like a catalyst, something that makes things speed up, okay? So real quick, okay, so we're going to talk about the use of HSL, hormone sensitive lipase. Now there's a couple ways that this can actually be used and be interpreted, but basically this thing is created by hormone sensitive lipases, like through testosterone, cortisol, insulin, catecholamines, estrogen, all those things. But in this particular video, in this particular series, I'm just going to talk about two of the things that I think you might want to know. One is insulin. Number two is catecholamines. Specifically, what a catecholamine is, something that's like in your body, like adrenaline and noradrenaline, okay? So you probably heard someone say like, oh, I did this crazy thing where I picked up a bus, or I threw a child like 15 feet and I've never been able to lift a weight in my life. Well, that's like adrenaline, right? Everything just like, boom, you just get so powerful out of nowhere and whatnot. There's ways that you can train to actually, get more of that potentiation, to get more of that. Sorry, I'm talking in terms again. There's ways that you can actually get more adrenaline out. It's kind of like your fight or flight. Like when humans give this option to die or live, they tend to live because of this particular thing, adrenaline. And it has a lot to do with mobilizing your fat. So if you tend to die more often, you're gonna break down more fat. Now, if you do that too often, I'm just playing with you about the dying, but if you do it too often, where you stimulate adrenaline too often, then it causes a lot more bad side effects overall. And then there's the other one, it's called noradrenaline or norepinephrine. Basically what it is kind of like the rest and digest. This is kind of like when you're sleeping and kind of just relax throughout the day. There's periods of times where you just get like, oh my gosh, something's gonna happen, right? That's adrenaline. And the other one is the other half of it, right? And basically what these things do is actually make hormone sensitive lipase work. So, okay, and now that I talked about the catecholamines, I want to talk about the major regulator of this thing right here. This is what regulates whether or not this thing works or not, right? It's called cyclic AMP. Holy moly. But basically what it is just something that helps this thing work better, okay? And so they're all directly integrated. They're all directly useful, right? So when one goes down, the other ones go down, okay? So if HSL is low through like insulin, if there's too much insulin in the blood, then the HSL is low, right? And also, if that thing right there is low, the cyclic AMP or CAMP is low, then fat mobilization is low as well, okay? And I wrote down that little note right here in mine, but I'll probably write it down on the bottom because I know this thing is gonna get a little confusing, even though I'm trying to make it as easy as possible. So that's what I'm trying to get to, is that you have to first break down the fats before you can move them, before you can use them, okay? And the way that we break them down is through those typical things right there: adrenaline, noradrenaline, insulin, catecholamines, testosterone, estrogen, so much more stuff. But that's not what I'm gonna cover here. I'm gonna talk about breaking it down, mobilizing it, and using it, right? Because that's how to burn fat. You can't just burn fat. You have to break it out of the fat cell, then push it into a different like movements, and I'll talk about that right now. And then you have to use it, because otherwise it'll go back to being stored fat. Okay. Now, once we broke it down, right? This is good. We got the HSL working good. We got cyclic AMP working good. All that stuff is good. You got adrenaline. You can, if something happens, you can get like in a state where it's like, holy moly, something's about to die. Or you can chill out for a couple minutes and be like, okay, blood flow's cool, the nerves are sending out blood from, then everything's working really well. Perfect. We broke it down. Good deal. Now like I said, guys, I'm gonna give you guys somewhere where you can go and just get the meal plan, workout, supplementation, and just utilize all that stuff so you don't have to understand all this. But I'm doing this for my nerdy people out there, or people that just like to know why. Okay? And I want to do this for you. I want to make sure that you understand. And number 2 is mobilization. Once you got it out of the fat cell, you have a fat cell, right? And you have like a triglyceride, which is stored fat. What you do is you have to take it out. Once you take it out, it's like floating around and whatnot. You need to mobilize it, you need to move it, or otherwise it's gonna go back in through a process we call re-esterification. Basically, what it means is just putting it back into the fat cell. Okay, so once you got it out of the like break it down to free fatty acid and the glycerol, we gotta push it somewhere, right? We gotta take it somewhere, we gotta have to move it. And the way we do that is through hormones, right? But I'll explain that later. Number 2 is aerobic exercise. Now, aerobic exercise is like cardio, but before you guys go jump on the cardio machine for like 45 minutes, let me tell you that not all cardio is created the same. Okay, and I'll give you specific guidelines on like how to do your cardio, what you should do, when you should do it, things like that on the later video. And if you want to jump straight to that, I should probably put a link for that, and I probably will. But the better you are aerobically, stronger, like with your aerobic base, the easier it's going to be for you to mobilize fat, move fat. Okay, so obviously that creates more blood flow, and that's what I want to talk about right here. Is mobilization is created through blood flow. Okay, and why that word back there, it says ATBF, is adipose tissue blood flow, which is fat tissue blood flow, right? You want blood flow to those fat tissues. So how you do that is aerobic exercise. And number 2 is kind of weird, but it's kind of like, you probably already knew this, but the hotter you are, the more blood flow you're gonna have. So this is why people wear wraps and stuff. Now, with those wraps, you're losing majority water. So I don't want you to do that, because once you lose all the water, it's very, very tough to burn any fat. You're basically just burning all muscle at that point. So I don't want you to do that. Don't do that, okay? Remember, stay with me, learn the stuff, and I'll teach you. I'll give you the exact guidelines. I'll show you guys where you can go get it. The exact guidelines of what I think you should follow, okay? So conversely about temperature, since we're on there, when it's super cold, your blood flow really just kind of halts. So your blood starts to constrict itself, which is why it kind of confuses me why people are like, oh yeah, you should go jump in an ice bath to burn fat. Doesn't make sense to me. Physiologically, it doesn't make sense to me. Question that. Anyways, another thing that you can use is long-term fasting. Some of the research shows that. For me, fasting, it's kind of tough, but I do it when I'm like with church. I do fasting, and then I do fasting just for dieting purposes here and there. But otherwise, there's 3 basic ways to mobilize or transport fats out of the fat cell, right? 1 is through having a strong aerobic cardio base. Number 2 is having a hot temperature, right? And number 3 is like long-term fasting. And the way that this thing right here is controlled by, it's kind of difficult to understand, but it's called adrenal receptors, okay? And there's certain parts of your body that have better adrenal receptors than others. So in this case, we talk about alpha and beta, right? You know what alpha means is like A, or big time. Beta means like testing or whatever. And so in this case, our alpha receptors are not good, and beta receptors are good for mobilizing fat, okay? And it's kind of weird because the more blood flow, so the way that you can understand this is if you have good alpha beta receptors is like your shoulders, right? It's hard for you, like, have you ever noticed that you don't really have fat around your shoulders? That just means you have a lot more beta receptors in your shoulders. Now you can't change that. It's genetic, that part's genetic. You can't change, you can train around it, make that muscle bigger, and it'll start to burn a little more fat around that area. Now, there's not really like a stubborn, like you can't just target an area and burn it. But that's a good way to understand where you hold a good majority of your beta androgen receptors, right? Like your shoulders are always kind of hot. That just means that they really don't have alpha adrenal receptors. I know it's getting kind of crazy, but just stay with me, okay? You touch your shoulders, it's really not fat. You touch your lower back, your hips, you can pull some fat off. That's where you store most of your fat. That's where the stubborn fat's gonna come in. And that's what I'm gonna cover in a couple of videos, but I wanna talk about all this before that, okay? And once we transported it out, once we get it out, and once we get it out and we transport it, the fats get connected to something, the blood vessel called albumin. You probably heard of that. Maybe like in a doctor or something, it says like albumin levels or something like that, whatever. And so once it gets transferred to that stuff, it gets into the bloodstream. And then you're in business. That's when you're in business. Once you got that, we got ourselves the ability to use it. Now, once we got all that stuff, once we got it onto the albumin, we can use it. And the way we use it is through a shuttle that we call carnitine palmitoyl transferase. Sounds crazy. And you're probably, what pops up in your head is like, oh, carnitine? People always tell me carnitine is good. I can lose fat by taking more carnitine. The truth of the matter is it looks awesome. It looks awesome on like paper, but in reality, it really doesn't show that much benefit. Like, you're not gonna put more carnitine in your body to mobilize more fat, to push more fat, to use more fat. It's really not gonna happen. So that carnitine thing, the shuttle, takes the fat cell from the bloodstream and it pushes it into the mitochondria. And you probably heard of the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell, right? Pushes it into the mitochondria to be burned. Now we're using that fat cell. And the way that you get to that point where you burn it is basically by having a great aerobic base. Once again, you have to have like a good cardio heart, because it's easier to have blood flow. It's easier to have that mitochondrial strength, okay? So another way is if you have a lot of glycogen in your blood, that shuttle is basically off, okay? So if you deplete all your glycogen, you can do it through exercise and diet. You need them both. You can't just exercise. You can't just like work out like 15 sets of 15 and expect all the glycogen to be burned, okay? That glycogen is stored sugar, okay? That's all it is. Nothing too fancy. But the way that most people get rid of it is through high intensity interval training and or doing a whole bunch of sets with no rest in between, which does burn glycogen better than just 1 or 2 sets of like super crazy heavy weight. So the studies actually don't show that it's crazy effective as compared to like dieting and exercise. So if you combine both, which like I said, I'm going to give you that opportunity to get hands on that later on, but I want to cover all this with you before we do, okay? Now, if you have lower glycogen, that carnitine palmitoyl transferase, CPT, is able to push more and more in there, and it gets stronger, okay? Gets stronger if you have an aerobic base, if you have low glycogen levels. So you can do both. You can do like deplete your glycogen and work out a little bit harder. Like I said, I'll give you that recommendation at the end, but I want to cover all this stuff for you so you understand why I put it all together the way I did. Okay, so I will see you in the next video on what to do. Okay, what to do once you got all that stuff, all the bases covered for that. Once we got the breakdown, mobilization, and using it. Okay, see you soon. I hope you liked this video. If you did like this video, please like it and share it so I know that you love my content, you love me, you like hanging out, you like learning like me, and you like to burn fat. If any of those criteria meet you, then share and like my video.